our colleague that, well, she started as an intern, and she got on the air because of her incredible tech expertise, working in these technology companies, new media companies, and then has gone on to be a radio personality in her own right beyond KJLH. I'm talking about Miles Bloxson. Good morning, Miles.
Good morning, Dominique.
Happy Gemini season.
I know. I'm excited.
Woo, woo. Yeah, my fellow Gemini. So, of a lot of the stories that we're going to touch on today, didn't get probably the mention that you would have thought they would in this busy news cycle. And I want to start out talking about 60 Minutes and these black women, because there's so much conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech, and how black people, Latinx people are left out of those jobs, left out of those stories. And it's always presented as something we're not there, so we're going to have to give you extra measures or extra support to get you into the business. But this story that happened on 60 Minutes is just the opposite. These women were there, and they were left out when 60 Minutes told the story, right?
Yeah, 60 Minutes ran a segment on racial bias and facial recognition, and it leaves out the black women who pioneered the research, which is crazy to me. And, a few of them spent a lot of hours with the team of 60 Minutes, telling their story and talking about their research. And one of the ladies said that on the way to get her COVID test to make sure that she was ready for the interview, she gets a notification saying, hey, we've canceled your segment.
Right? That's crazy. And so
it
is insane. Artificial intelligence is, that what's used for all kinds of things. They use it for credit checks. They use it for facial recognition technology. So many things that affect your ability to live your life. And so many things that could cost you time and money if it goes wrong. And these three black women did research that helped to prove that this technology is basically mimicking the racism and unconscious bias that is present in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you think about it, they use technology for, capturing people that have done crimes and things of that nature. So the last thing we need is for the technology being used, to be used against us. We're already, dealing with a lot anyway. And so now we have technology that's also mimicking how we're treated already. So this is definitely not a good thing. I am glad that they were doing the research on it, but it's just baffling to me how they wouldn't include the black women that are doing the research in the story.
Right. Well, especially when the whole episode was about two men, as you said, who were arrested because facial recognition identified them as suspects in criminal cases, and the technology was just wrong. And there was an experiment done with black lawmakers where a bunch of them had their faces run, and the AI found that a bunch of them were wanted criminals, even though these are like Congress people and senators, right? And so it was one of the studies. But what's crazy to me about this is these women, Joy Buolamwini, Timnit Gebru, and Deborah Raji. They're scientists, they're black women. Well, their study goes back before this study that was cited on 60 Minutes. Their study goes back before 2019. And so this erasure of these black women scientists doesn't happen by AI. This happens by regular old human being technology. As they try to tell the story of racism on 60 Minutes, in the technology, they just erase the black women. And one of the things that's notable about this that I like is that it really came to light because of social media.
Yeah, it was other people, like colleagues of these black women, people that have done research in this same field, that were like, hey, how do you run a story of this magnitude about this topic and not include the pioneers? It's impossible.
Right, especially when they interviewed men scientists from the National Institute of Standards and Technology about their research, and their research was based on the research of these black women. It's just beyond the pale. So that, that's one of those things that kind of irks you, but I think it's important for us to highlight their contribution so that we'll know, at least, if nobody else knows.
Right.
A lot of conversation about the Middle East the past couple weeks because of the clashes between Hamas and Israel. And we're in a ceasefire, appears to be holding. That's great. One of the things that happened this time with the clashes that hadn't happened on a widespread level in the past is that Palestinian or Arab-descended citizens inside Israel were clashing with Israelis, especially some of the far right-wing Israeli groups, right? And so these are, aside from the fighting that happens in the West Bank from time to time, and this time it was in the Gaza Strip where Israel was bombing the Gaza Strip and Hamas was sending rockets over to Israel. Hamas is the militant group that's, one of the power players in Gaza. And, of course, Israel has that Iron Dome, so that was keeping those rockets mostly out. Huge civilian death toll, but now we had clashes between Arab-descended and Israeli Jews inside of Israel. And one of the things that we found out is that the mob attacks that were happening inside of Israel were being coordinated on WhatsApp.
Yes, on
That's
WhatsApp,
crazy.
like the most used messaging app ever. And people use WhatsApp because everything's encrypted, So this is a perfect place for groups to do this. So we see social media work in positive ways about organizing marches and, getting food to people when under extreme weather conditions and things of that nature. But we don't think about it being used in these circumstances. And it is being used. And this is one of those things where the social media company, WhatsApp, or, the messaging platform can't do really anything about it. The only thing they can do is anytime somebody reports an account, they can report that account to WhatsApp and say, hey, this person sent me X, Y, and Z. But they can't actually read the messages on their own platform because everything's encrypted.
Yeah, this is crazy. These were more than, they said, according to the New York Times, more than 100 groups formed during that fighting, that were, a lot of them were being used by groups of far right-wing Israelis that were attacking Arab Jewish citizens. The Jewish Guard is the name of one. Death to Arabs is the name of another. And like you said, these are just, it kind of reminds me of the way, like you mentioned, yes, WhatsApp has been used for protests. It's been used for flash mobs. You can quickly organize people and then quickly disperse them. And I guess there's nothing that can be done, but I feel like these social media companies need to, and it's tricky because you don't want to impede on people's right to communicate, but at the same time, when it's being used for mob violence, it seems like there has to be something that can be done. The Israeli police are saying they're monitoring, and I'm sure we know, like, for example, the LAPD, we did that story already recently about how the LAPD has expanded their monitoring of social media because they say that they can predict who might be in air quotes, troublemaker in a protest. So that, goes over to the side that seems like it could be impinging on people's rights. So it's a delicate balancing act. because LAPD said now they're going to be monitoring not just people that they think could be considered troublemakers, but monitoring their own officers because they don't want them to post stuff that creates problems for the department. And I have mixed feelings about that, because if they are white supremacists, I'd rather they post and get busted. But
than to hide it.
Right, to hide it because they don't want to lose their jobs. It's I don't know. I think this is... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a hard balance. Like what you said, it's a delicate issue, because it's like you want people to be able to say how they really feel. And then, that could mess up the company that they work for. Like, in the case that you're talking about, working for the police department, you would hope there's no one that's working there that's racist. But, hey, this is America. So it's one of those things, Dominique, where it's like we have access to all of this stuff. We have access to all of these platforms. And we're always saying, hey, we want free speech. But when free speech gets ugly, or when, things go wrong, then it's like, okay, so how do we now monitor this certain group of people? And there's too many people using these platforms to have monitors or enough moderators for a lot of these social media platforms and these messaging platforms. And we always say that there's just not enough manpower to manage all of this stuff.
Yeah. There's plenty of people if they pay enough. That's always the question, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to pay?
But it's billions of people. Yeah, it's billions of people, though. Like, how many people would you have to employ to manage billions of people on these platforms?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and speaking of billions of people, so Donald Trump's platform, he has his own platform. Twitter decided not to let him back on, right? At least for now. They kicked the can down the road. They're going to revisit it. I think in 6 months, right? They're going to check and see if he should get his Twitter account back. But his knockoff Twitter, his swap meet Twitter from the desk of Donald J. Trump. It's more like a Facebook. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or his knockoff Facebook, because Facebook is the one that's like, hey, 6 months, we're going to maybe have something there.
Okay.
They had that oversight committee mixed with lawyers and politicians and all these people, like a fancy oversight board that was like, hey, Facebook, you didn't give us enough information to even do this, so you're going to have to put some policies in place, and then we'll give you 6 months to do so, and then you can present this back to us.
So that was Facebook. That was Facebook. So Twitter was actually the one that is supposedly permanent, whatever that means. It means until they get lobbied enough, or until he becomes president again. But we'll see. But how is the knockoff Facebook, as you put it, going for the former president?
It's really a blog. He threatened to make this whole social media platform. It's really a little corny. I mean, I don't want to say a corny blog. I probably shouldn't say that. But it's just a blog. It's like a it has a landing page. As soon as you get there, it just says, from the desk of Donald J. Trump. Of course, his name is bigger than all the other text on the screen. And then it's just really a whole bunch of articles that came out while he was the president. And then there's just information on those articles of the initiatives that he was pushing while he was in office.
I need to go check it out. Not right now, though. But does he, I've been having a Trump fast. Those of you who listen to the front page know we've barely talked about him, because I was so burnt out after 4 years that felt like 100 years of listening to his voice and reading tweets. It was like, I'll just take a break. But it's important to keep at least half of an eye on him, because he's probably going to run for president again, or pretend to run for president so he can raise money. But does he have his tweets, his new messages?
I mean, all he has like the little social media icons for Facebook and Twitter, and it's funny because it's like you can't even really use those right now. So I guess they're there for the future if he does get back on the platform. But right now, it literally looks like a Dear Diary. It just says his name at the top. It has the time and the date that he posted these little snippets, and it's just like little bitty paragraphs of information about things that he's working on right now. I'm a billionaire.
Can I get someone to make an app? Oh, well. Doesn't matter. But what I am appreciative of, because I have seen some quotes from this, is that that the media is not faithfully reporting on every blog post that he comes up with.
Oh, yeah, I'm very happy about that as well. There is also a big contribution button at the top of the site, of course, because,
Yeah, so
and there's a store, too, where you can shop for little Donald Trump trinkets if you're missing something from your desk. They have a lot of options there. So,
okay, yeah. So have at it, family. Have at it. So this story about the apps for kids, of course, I'm a mom, but it's very worrisome because right now a lot of schools are using apps. When we talk online learning, it's not just Zoom, which is one, a lot of kids are on, but even if you look at coming back onto campuses, there are contact tracing apps that they're using to make sure kids are staying far enough apart, and that if they do come in contact with another kid that later gets diagnosed with COVID, they can trace that. All of this is happening through apps. And that's not counting the apps that kids use for fun. Now, this article is talking about how 60% of school apps, these are not the ones your kids download in the App Store to play, some little game. These are the ones that they have to use because they are part of their schoolwork. 60% of them are sharing data on your child. That's crazy.
Yes, 60%. And the data includes everything from their entire contact list to their location.
That sounds dangerous.
And it's happening. It's very dangerous. And it's happening on Android phones more than Apple phones. Or iPhones instead of Apple phones. But it's happening more on Android phones because Android doesn't have as many stipulations put in place for third-party apps in the first place, so app developers. So for Apple, if you want to be in the App Store, you have to go through all of this, these rigorous tests and, things that you have to get through, security protocols. But for Android, they still have some stuff put in place, but it's not as intense as Apple's process. So, yeah, that's what we're dealing with right now. So if you have an Android phone, it's more than likely happening more on your end than it is if you have an iPhone.
Well, of course, my kid doesn't like iPhone, so he has an Android. It's a generational thing, I know.
Yeah, just some information there. So,
but what can we do as parents? This is freaky. I don't want somebody to know where track my kid's location, and I know it's companies that are doing it really more than individuals. But still, it reminds me of this whole conversation that, now they're talking about having a kids Instagram for kids 13 and under, which is the most terrible idea I've heard in a really long time, so that they can voluntarily get information. I did a call to consciousness. I do those at 6:00 every day about this, because to me, it's like letting Mark Zuckerberg whisper in your kid's ear all day. Buy this, get this, feel this way about yourself and how you look. Adopt this standard of beauty. It's literally like letting your kid there, because Instagram is owned by Facebook, of course, and they're saying, well, kids lie about their age to get on Instagram, so this way they won't have to lie about their age. They can just be on the kids' Instagram, and that's a no for me.
Dominique, what's crazy to me is that I was watching a special, I think, on Bill Gates a while back. He wouldn't even let his kids touch devices until a certain age, and then also he would only let them be on it for a couple of minutes a day. So if these developers, if the people that are at the very top monitor their kids' usage, they know that it's addictive. So why is the everyday person not telling their kids, hey, you can't do this. You can't be on social media all day. You have to, there's a time limit. There's time constraints.
Yeah, that's true.
It's back in the parents' hands again.
But it's not just time constraints either, Miles, because, and I know time constraints are important, and a lot of parents are focused on that, and they have the little, devices, little apps that can limit what your child can do on their phone and all that. I'm not talking about that, though, because as soon as they get on the app ever, even if it's for a minute, the data is being collected on them. And that's the real story. That's the real story of what these companies make money on, is information. And the minute you let a kid have, an Instagram account, and now it's kids' Instagram, so they know they're a kid, not only are they tracking them and getting data on them, they are also targeting them with ads, just like they target you. I was looking at shoes on Amazon. Now every website that I go on has shoes popping up in the picture for me to buy. Well, imagine that for kids. It's bad enough on TV where they sell you sugary cereals, your kid's sugary cereals, but at least you're there and you can see what they're selling your kid on TV, and you could go, oh yeah, well that's really not, you can practice media literacy, you can talk back to the screen. But when it's just the kid on Instagram, that's like a private conversation between them and this huge corporation whose main job is to manipulate the kid.
No, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. I mean, the only thing that we can do at this point, like what you asked earlier, is that you can, every time you download an app, it always, a lot of times, especially if you're using an iPhone, it will ask you, do you want to share your location? You want to say no. Don't skip over those prompts that you see when you first download something. A lot of us just want to get to the app, so we don't pay attention to those little things that pop up in order to sign on to the app. So pay very close attention to that information. And then there's also ways, too, to stop your phone from tracking, the way that you shop and what you look at and things of that nature, which is it's like an advertising ID. And I know that we've gone over this before. We can do it again. But it's something that you can easily Google, like resetting your phone so that your phone is not tracking everything that you're doing, so that when you see a pair of shoes, you don't see them again when you go to a website. There's a way to reset that over and over again so that, you have, some clarity, and you don't have to look at things and be enticed to buy things, and your kids don't have to either. But it's the time that's involved in doing things like this.
You have to know, too. A lot of stuff. Yeah, you have to know, which a lot of people don't. Yeah, that's true. I just reset my phone. I don't get that stuff on my phone. I get it on my desktop. But with a kid, I think that would be an important thing to be able to do. Man, there's about 100 more things I wanted to talk to you about. I guess we don't have time for all 100. It's Radio Free 102.3 KJLH, Compton, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Inglewood. Do want to ask you about these, what they're calling frag attacks, which I tried to get my mind around what the heck they were talking about, but it's basically regarding the lack of security when we do things on Wi-Fi, right?
Yes, it's that. It's that little bit of vulnerability that we have. A lot of times with the frag attacks, though, it requires user interaction and or uncommon network settings. So this is something that doesn't happen as much to just like everyday users of Wi-Fi. We're all on Wi-Fi all the time. I would say just pay attention when you're connecting to Wi-Fi wherever you are, and make sure that it's a secure network, and you'll be fine. It's just one of those things where if you're not paying attention, if you're just trying to get to the Wi-Fi and trying to get online and not looking at the prompts and not looking at where your browser is taking you. Like sometimes when you type in the wrong browser, you'll end up on the wrong domain name. You're trying to put in Amazon and you put in Amazon or something like that.
Right.
That could lead to a frag attack. That can lead to something of that nature. So just being aware and paying attention to what's going on your phone, essentially.
Okay. But what happens if you did have a frag attack? I mean, what does it really mean? Is it like a virus or?
It's not really a virus. It just means now that the person that is conducting the frag attack they have access to your phone.
Oh, that's all bad.
It's just basically being able. Yes, it means that they have access to your phone, that they have an entry portal into your private information. So that's why it's so important just not to connect to any Wi-Fi network. When we're out and about, we tend to say, "Oh, is there free Wi-Fi here? I'll just take that." Be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, and a lot of times you go unsecured. Oh, good, I don't need a password, but that's not necessarily a good sign.
That's not good. Yeah, that's not good at all.
Yeah, unless you don't care about your phone. But I would think certainly if you're banking on your phone, and a lot of people are now, at least transferring money and such, using apps like, Venmo, Zelle, whatever, it just doesn't seem like it'd be good to have people having access to get into your phone. The phone is like almost like having someone in your house, right? At this point.
Yes, or even your computer too. This can happen on your computer as well. When you're out at a coffee shop and you decide to connect to Wi-Fi, it's the same thing. So,
good point.
Not just mobile devices. It's anytime you connect to Wi-Fi.
Well, I guess we'll have to get to some of these other stories on another day. But, Miles, thank you so much, as always, for giving us a tour of what's going on in the tech world. And remind us how we can keep track of you and all the great things you're always posting.
Miles Tomogul on Instagram. That's MILESTOMOGUL, and milestomogul.com. And thanks for having me on, Dominique, and happy Gemini season.
Whoop, whoop. Our birthdays are coming up. All right.
Yes.
Happy birthday in advance. And thanks so much for all the information that you always bring to us.
Thank you, Dominique.